It could have been a normal Tuesday night, but what happened turned the rest of my life into a nightmare. The kitchen was bustling with activity as Abigail chopped vegetables for dinner and I set the table. The aromatic blend of garlic and rosemary filled the room, making my stomach rumble. "Dustin, I was thinking," she began, her voice casual as she continued to slice. "I'd like to invite my new boss over for dinner." "You know him, Vincent Harrison?" I looked up from the plates I was arranging. "Vincent Harrison, the new guy at your office." "Yes," she confirmed, her knife pausing mid-slice. "He mentioned he wants to meet you and get a feel for our family atmosphere. I thought it could be nice." I shrugged. "Sure, why not? I'd like to meet him too. The last two people in that position didn't last long, right?" Abigail nodded, her eyes clouding for a moment. "Yeah, it's been a bit of a revolving door. The last person needed a creative break in Sri Lanka, and the one before." She trailed off, and I remembered the story vividly. A supposed suicide, though the details were bizarre and unsettling. I pushed those thoughts aside. "All right, let's do it then. When were you thinking?" "How about tomorrow night?" she suggested, a hopeful smile tugging at her lips. "Sounds good to me," I agreed. "I'll leave work a bit early and pick up something nice on the way home." The next day flew by in a blur of meetings and paperwork. By late afternoon, I realized it was time to head out. I quickly sent Abigail a message. "On my way. Love you." Her reply was almost instant. "See you soon. Love you too." I said goodbye to my secretary and headed out, making a quick stop to buy a bouquet of roses. Abigail loved little surprises like this, and I loved seeing her face light up when she received them. When I pulled into our driveway, I noticed a sleek black Mercedes parked at the curb. That must be Vincent, I thought as I grabbed the flowers and walked to the front door. Inside, Abigail was adding the final touches to the table. She looked up as I entered, her face breaking into a radiant smile. "Dustin, these are beautiful," she exclaimed, taking the roses from me. "You always know how to make my day." I leaned in and kissed her cheek. Just wanted to make our evening special. "Well, you succeeded," she whispered, her eyes sparkling. "Now go and say hello to Vincent. He's in the living room." I walked in to find Vincent seated on our couch, looking perfectly at ease. He stood up as I entered, extending a hand. "Hi, Dustin. Vincent Harrison." "Nice to meet you, Vincent," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. He was a tall man, fit, with a hint of grey at his temples, and a perpetual smirk that instantly set me on edge. "Thanks for having me over," he said, his voice smooth. "Abigail's told me a lot about you." "All good, I hope," I replied with a chuckle, trying to break the ice. "Can I get you a drink? We've got some good whiskey." "Whiskey sounds great," he agreed, his smirk never fading. As I poured the drinks, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling Vincent's presence gave me. But I tried to focus on making the evening pleasant. "So, how's the new job treating you?" I asked, handing him a glass. "It's been interesting," Vincent said, taking a sip. "Your wife's quite the asset to our team." "I know," I said proudly. "She's the best." We clinked glasses and settled into conversation, though the tension in the air remained. I couldn't help but feel there was something more behind Vincent's smug demeanor, but I pushed the thought away. This was just dinner after all. Abigail called us to the table, her voice cheerful. "Dinner's ready." The evening seemed to be going smoothly. Abigail's cooking was, as always, exceptional. The roast chicken was juicy, the potatoes crispy on the outside and soft on the inside, and the green beans perfectly seasoned. Abigail had outdone herself, and I could tell she was proud of her efforts. We were halfway through our meal when Vincent leaned back in his chair, swirling the whiskey in his glass. He had that same snug smile on his face that had been there since he walked through the door. It was starting to get on my nerves. "You've looked quite a wife, Dustin," Vincent said, breaking the comfortable silence. I smiled, reaching over to squeeze Abigail's hand. "I have to agree with you there. She's the meaning of my life." Vincent's smirk widened. Then I suppose you'll understand why I'm about to tell you what I'm going to do. I frowned, not liking where this was headed. And what exactly is that, Vincent? He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine with a cold intensity. I'm going to sleep with your pretty wife. She'll enjoy it, and you'll watch. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I was too stunned to respond. I glanced at Abigail, who looked equally shocked and confused. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Excuse me, I finally managed to say, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. Is this some kind of sick joke? Vincent chuckled, taking another sip of his whiskey. No joke, Dustin, just a statement of intent. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Hold that thought, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'll be right back. In the kitchen, Abigail followed me, her eyes wide with worry. Dustin, what is going on? What did he just say? I took a deep breath, trying to calm the rage boiling inside me. He said he's going to sleep with you and that I should watch. Abigail's face turned pale. What? That's insane. I know, I said, my jaw clenched. But I'm going to handle this. Stay here. I'll take care of it. I walked back into the living room, struggling to maintain my composure. Vincent, why don't you come with me to my office? I'd like to show you something. He raised an eyebrow but followed me without protest. As we entered my man cave, his eyes widened slightly at the sight of my collection. Photos, commendations, medals, knives, and guns adorned the walls. So, you're planning to sleep with my wife? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Vincent leaned against the doorframe, his smirk still in place. Yes. Do you have a problem with that? I took a deep breath. You know, Vincent, I don't think Abigail told you everything about me. I used to be a scout sniper in the military. Most of my 137 confirmed kills were at distances of 300 to 500 meters. At that distance, you'll never hear the shot. 1 second you're alive, the next you're dead. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Listen, Dustin, this is nothing personal. Oh, but it is personal, I said, pulling out a large knife from my collection. You just told me you're going to sleep with my wife and expect me to watch. That makes it very personal for me. Vincent's face paled as he took a step back. Look, I didn't mean to offend you. It was just a joke. I shook my head. A joke. You think threatening to destroy my family is a joke? He swallowed hard, his smirk finally disappearing. Please, Dustin, I didn't mean it. I don't want any trouble. I took a step closer, holding the knife up so he could see the light glinting off the blade. You better be very careful, Vincent, because if you ever try to come near my wife again, you won't see the shot coming. Understand? Vincent nodded vigorously, his bravado completely gone. Yes, I understand. I'm sorry. Good, I said, lowering the knife. Now get out of my house. He didn't need to be told twice. As he hurried out the door, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I knew this wasn't over, but for now, at least, I had made my point. I returned to the kitchen where Abigail was waiting, her face etched with worry. What happened? She asked. I think he got the message, I said, pulling her into my arms. Let's just enjoy the rest of our evening. As we sat back down at the table, the tension slowly began to fade, but in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. After Vincent left, the house felt different. The air was thick with unspoken words and lingering tension. Abigail and I tried to carry on as usual, but it was clear that what Vincent had said was weighing heavily on both of us. I knew I needed to take action to ensure he understood just how serious I was. The next day, I left work a bit early and headed straight to a sporting goods store. I wanted to add a few more pieces to my collection, and I had an idea of how to make my point to Vincent even clearer. I picked out a new hunting knife and a set of throwing knives. They were sleek, sharp, and intimidating. Exactly what I needed. That evening after dinner, I told Abigail I needed to have another talk with Vincent. She looked worried but nodded in understanding. Be careful, she said, squeezing my hand. I trust you, Dustin. I called Vincent and told him we needed to talk, suggesting he come over to my house again. Surprisingly, he agreed, though I could hear the unease in his voice. When he arrived, I greeted him with a cold stare and led him back to my office. "Let's make this quick," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. Vincent followed me inside, his eyes darting around the room, likely remembering our last conversation. I pointed to a chair and he sat down, his posture tense. "Vincent, I don't think you fully understand the gravity of what you said last night," I began, opening a drawer and taking out the new hunting knife. I placed it on the desk between us, the blade catching the light. His eyes widened, but he tried to keep his composure. "Dustin," I apologized. "I said it was a mistake." I shook my head, my grip tightening on the knife. "A mistake? You threatened to destroy my family. That goes beyond a mistake. That was a deliberate act of disrespect." He swallowed hard, his gaze fixed on the blade glinting in the light. "I didn't mean it, Dustin. I swear." I picked up the knife, turning it slowly in my hands. "Whether you meant it or not, the damage is done. Now you need to understand what the consequences will be if you ever try something like that again." I stood up and walked over to a target board I had set up in the corner of the room. It was an old archery target, but it would serve my purpose. I took one of the new throwing knives and held it up for Vincent to see. "I used to be a scout sniper in the military," I said, my voice calm and steady. "Accuracy is everything. A single mistake can cost lives. Watch closely." With a swift, practiced motion, I threw the knife. It embedded itself dead center in the target, quivering slightly from the impact. Vincent flinched, his face growing pale. "Dustin, please. I get it. I won't go near Abigail. I promise." I turned back to him, my expression stern. "I want to believe you, Vincent, but promises are easy to break. I need you to understand that if you even think about coming near my wife again, the consequences will be severe. Do you understand?" He nodded vigorously, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. "Yes, I understand. It won't happen again." I walked back to the desk and placed the knife down, leaning in close. "Good. Now get out of my house and don't come back unless it's for business. And if you ever so much as look at my wife the wrong way, you'll regret it." Vincent stood up quickly, almost knocking over the chair in his haste. "Thank you, Dustin. I appreciate it. I really do." I watched as he hurried out of the room, the tension finally starting to ease from my shoulders. I knew he wouldn't dare cross me again, but I also knew that I would need to keep an eye on him. People like Vincent didn't change overnight. As I returned to the living room, Abigail looked up at me, her face full of concern. "How did it go?" she asked. "I think he got the message," I replied, sitting down beside her and taking her hand. "But we need to stay vigilant. I don't trust him." She nodded, leaning her head on my shoulder. "I trust you, Dustin. We'll get through this together." And as we sat there, holding each other close, I knew she was right. No matter what came our way, we would face it together, as a family. The day after my warning to Vincent, I felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. I hoped I had scared him off for good, but part of me remained cautious. As evening approached, Abigail prepared another fantastic dinner, determined to return to normalcy. She had outdone herself again. The smell of roast beef, garlic mashed potatoes, and freshly baked bread filled the house. The table was set with our best china, and a bottle of red wine stood breathing in the center. "Everything looks amazing, Abigail," I said, wrapping my arms around her from behind as she checked the oven. "Thanks, Dustin," she replied, leaning back against me. I wanted tonight to be special, just for us. We sat down and began to eat, the familiar warmth of our home slowly easing the lingering tension. The food was delicious, and for a while, we simply enjoyed each other's company. Midway through the meal, the doorbell rang. Abigail and I exchanged puzzled looks. "Who could that be?" she asked, wiping her hands on a napkin. "I'll get it," I said, standing up and heading for the door. When I opened it, there stood Vincent, looking nervous and holding a bottle of wine. My initial reaction was anger, but I took a deep breath and reminded myself to stay calm. "Vincent," I said, my voice flat. "What are you doing here?" "I know I'm not supposed to come over uninvited," he said quickly, "but I wanted to apologize properly. I brought this as a peace offering." He held out the wine. I sighed, considering my options. It was clear he was trying to make amends, and a part of me wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. "All right, come in," I said, stepping aside. Abigail looked surprised to see Vincent, but didn't say anything as I led him to the dining room. Vincent brought a bottle of wine, I explained, setting it on the table. Vincent offered a tentative smile. "I just wanted to say I'm really sorry for what I said. It was out of line, and I regret it deeply." Abigail glanced at me, then back at Vincent. "Thank you for apologizing," she said softly. "We appreciate it." We continued our meal, and although the atmosphere was awkward at first, it slowly began to relax. Vincent shared some stories from work, and we talked about more mundane things. I kept a close eye on him, but he seemed genuine in his desire to make things right. As dessert was served, Vincent cleared his throat. "Dustin, Abigail, I know I overstepped, and I understand if you never want to see me again. But I hope we can move past this. I've learned my lesson." I nodded slowly. "We all make mistakes, Vincent. What matters is that we learn from them and don't repeat them." He nodded, looking relieved. "Thank you. I promise you won't have any more trouble from me." After dinner, Vincent left and Abigail and I sat in the living room, reflecting on the evening. "Do you think he meant it?" she asked. "I hope so," I replied. "But I'm going to keep an eye on him, just in case." Abigail sighed, leaning against me. "It's been a crazy few days. I just want things to go back to normal." I kissed her forehead. "They will, Abigail. We'll make sure of it." As we sat there in the warmth of our home, I felt a renewed sense of determination. No matter what challenges came our way, I knew we could face them together, and I would do whatever it took to protect my family. Despite Vincent's apology, a sense of unease lingered. I wanted to believe him, but something in my gut told me to stay alert. The weekend arrived, and Abigail and I decided to have a quiet evening at home, hoping to shake off the tension of the past few days. We were sitting on the couch, watching a movie, when Abigail's phone buzzed with a message. She glanced at it, and her face paled. "It's Vincent," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What does he want?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "He says he needs to talk, that it's urgent." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my anger in check. "Tell him to come over. Let's get this over with." 15 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Vincent standing there, looking agitated. "Dustin, Abigail, thank you for seeing me on such short notice," he said, stepping inside. "What's so urgent, Vincent?" I asked, crossing my arms. He took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and there's something I need to confess. The reason I acted the way I did was because, well, I've been having some problems at work. It's made me do things I'm not proud of." I exchanged a glance with Abigail. "What kind of problems?" I asked, my tone worry. "Pressure from the higher-ups," he explained, running a hand through his hair. "They've been pushing for results, and I've been under a lot of stress. I took it out on you, and I know that's no excuse, but I thought you should know." Abigail looked at him, her expression softening a bit. "We understand stress, Vincent, but what you said was out of line. We need to know it won't happen again." Vincent nodded vigorously. "It won't, I promise. I've been seeing a therapist to help me manage my stress better. I just wanted to clear the air." "Thank you for telling us," Abigail said gently, "but we need to make sure this behavior stops." "It will," he assured us. "I don't want to lose my job, and I definitely don't want to lose the respect of my colleagues. Or you too." We stood there in silence for a moment, the tension slowly ebbing away. Finally, I extended my hand. "All right, Vincent, we appreciate your honesty. Just make sure you keep your word." He shook my hand, looking relieved. "I will, Dustin. Thank you. After he left, Abigail and I sat back down on the couch. Do you think he's really getting help? She asked. I hope so, I replied. But I'm not letting my guard down just yet. A few days later, I was at work when my phone buzzed with a text from Abigail. Vincent's at the office again. He wants to have a private word. I felt a surge of anger, but kept my reply calm. Stay in a public place. Don't go anywhere alone with him. Got it, she replied. That evening, Abigail and I sat down to talk. What did he want? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He just wanted to apologize again, she said. He seems genuine, Dustin. Maybe he's really trying to change. I nodded, though a part of me remained skeptical. I hope so, for his sake. A week later, I received a call from one of Vincent's colleagues, a friend of mine from work. Dustin, you need to know something, he said, his voice low. Vincent's been acting strange. He's been talking about you and Abigail a lot. It's making everyone uncomfortable. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? He's been saying things, suggesting he's still interested in Abigail. I thought he was over it, but now I'm not so sure. I hung up, my hands shaking with anger. That evening, I confronted Abigail. We need to talk to Vincent. Now. We drove to Vincent's apartment, my mind racing with what I was going to say. When he opened the door, he looked surprised to see us. Dustin, Abigail, what are you doing here? We need to talk, I said, pushing past him into the living room. What's this about? He asked, his face a mask of confusion. I heard from a colleague that you've been talking about Abigail, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. After everything, you're still not over it. Vincent's eyes widened. Dustin, I swear, it's just been stress. I didn't mean anything by it. Enough with the excuses, I snapped. You need to understand that this stops now. If I hear one more word about you bothering Abigail or talking about her at work, there will be serious consequences. Abigail stepped forward, her voice firm, but gentle. Vincent, you need help. Please get it, for your sake and for ours. Vincent looked at her, then at me, and finally nodded. I understand. I promise. I'll get the help I need. As we left his apartment, I felt a mixture of relief and lingering doubt. This confrontation was necessary, but I knew it might not be the last. We did the right thing, Abigail said softly as we drove home. I hope so, I replied, gripping the steering wheel. But we need to stay vigilant. This isn't over yet. As we pulled into our driveway, I took a deep breath and looked at Abigail. No matter what happens, we'll face it together. She nodded, squeezing my hand. Together always. And with that, we stepped into our home, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing we had each other's backs. Days passed, and though Vincent had promised to stay away, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Abigail and I were trying to return to our routine, but the shadow of his presence lingered. We needed to make sure Vincent understood the seriousness of the situation once and for all. One evening, as Abigail and I were finishing dinner, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Vincent, asking to meet at a nearby coffee shop. I showed it to Abigail, and she frowned. What do you think he wants now? She asked. Only one way to find out, I replied. But this time, we go together. We drove to the coffee shop, a small, quiet place where we hoped there wouldn't be much of a scene. When we walked in, Vincent was already there, sitting in a corner booth, looking more nervous than ever. Vincent, I greeted him as we approached the table. What's this about? He gestured for us to sit. Thank you for coming. I need to clear the air. I can't keep living like this, knowing there's tension between us. I exchanged a glance with Abigail before we sat down. All right, Vincent, speak your mind. He took a deep breath. I know I've made mistakes, and I know I've caused you both a lot of stress. I've been seeing a therapist. I'm trying to get my life back on track. But I need to know if there's any way we can move past this. Abigail leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. Vincent, we appreciate that you're getting help. But you need to understand the gravity of what you did. You threatened our family. That's not something we can easily forget. Vincent nodded, looking down at his hands. I know, I'm truly sorry. I don't want to lose my job or your friendship. Friendship, I repeated, my anger bubbling up again. Vincent, we were never friends. You crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed. I understand, he said quickly, but I need to know if there's any way to make things right. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Vincent, here's the deal. From now on, you keep your distance from Abigail and me. At work, you remain professional and strictly business. No more personal conversations, no more trying to get close. Do you understand? He nodded vigorously. Yes, I understand. I promise I'll keep my distance. And if we hear that you're talking about Abigail again, or if you try to approach her outside of work, I continued, my voice low and serious, there will be consequences, not just from me, but from HR. Do you understand that? Vincent's face turned pale, but he nodded. I understand. I promise I'll stay away. Abigail looked at him, her eyes softening slightly. Vincent, we hope you do get the help you need, but you need to respect our boundaries. This is your last chance. He swallowed hard, his eyes glistening with tears. Thank you, Abigail. I won't let you down. We stood up to leave, and Vincent remained seated, looking defeated but determined. As we walked out, I felt a sense of relief mixed with lingering apprehension. I hoped this would be the end of it, but I knew we had to stay vigilant. In the car, Abigail turned to me, her eyes filled with concern. Do you think he'll really keep his promise this time? I hope so, I said, starting the engine. But we can't let our guard down. Not yet. Back at home, we settled into our usual evening routine, the tension in the air slightly lessened. Taking control of the situation gave us a sense of empowerment. As we sat on the couch, Abigail leaned her head on my shoulder. Thank you for standing by me through all of this, Dustin. I kissed the top of her head. Always, Abigail. We'll get through this together. With that, we found a sense of peace, knowing we had taken a stand to protect our family. The road ahead might still have its challenges, but we were ready to face them side by side. The weeks following our meeting with Vincent were surprisingly quiet. Abigail and I settled back into our routine, slowly beginning to feel like ourselves again. I kept a close eye on things at work, making sure there were no whispers or rumors about Vincent's behavior. So far, everything seemed normal. One Friday evening, Abigail and I decided to go out for dinner. It had been a while since we had a proper date night, and we both needed a break from the tension of the past few weeks. We chose a cozy Italian restaurant in town, a place we used to frequent when we first started dating. As we sat at our table, enjoying a bottle of wine, Abigail reached across and took my hand. I'm so glad we can do this again, she said, her eyes sparkling in the candlelight. Me too, I replied, squeezing her hand. We deserve this. Halfway through our meal, my phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it, expecting something from work, but instead it was from Vincent. I frowned and opened the message. Dustin, I know I promised to stay away, but there's something important I need to tell you. Can we meet? Abigail noticed my change in expression. What is it? She asked, concern creeping into her voice. It's from Vincent, I said, showing her the message. He wants to meet. Says it's important. Abigail sighed, the worry returning to her eyes. What do you think he wants? I don't know, I admitted, but I think we need to find out. I stepped outside the restaurant to make the call. Vincent answered on the first ring. Dustin, thanks for calling back. Can we meet tonight? I'm out with Abigail, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Can it wait? No, it can't, he replied, sounding genuinely anxious. Please, it's really important. All right, I sighed. Meet us at the park in an hour. When I returned to the table, Abigail looked at me expectantly. We're meeting him at the park, I said. He sounded desperate. An hour later, we arrived at the park. It was dark and quiet, the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze the only sound. We found Vincent sitting on a bench, looking more disheveled than I had ever seen him. "Vincent," I said, approaching cautiously. "What's going on?" He stood up, wringing his hands nervously. "Dustin, Abigail, thank you for coming. I know I promised to stay away, but there's something you need to know." "All right," I said, crossing my arms. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "I've been digging into some things at work, and I found out something that might put you both in danger. There's been some shady dealings going on, and I think someone might be targeting you because of me." Abigail gasped, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Targeting us? What do you mean?" "I overheard a conversation," he said, his voice trembling. "Some people at the company were talking about making sure you don't interfere with their plans. I think it's because of the trouble I cause. I'm so sorry, Dustin. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I exchanged a worried glance with Abigail. "We need to go to the police," she said firmly. "This is serious." Vincent nodded. "I agree. I just wanted to warn you first. I'm going to come clean to the authorities about everything I know. It's the least I can do." We thanked him and left the park, heading straight to the police station. As we sat in the small, sterile room, recounting everything to the officer, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. This was far from over. Back at home, Abigail and I sat on the couch, holding each other tightly. "Dustin, what are we going to do?" she asked, her voice shaking. "We're going to stay strong," I said, kissing her forehead. "We'd faced so much already, and we can get through this too. Together." The next few days were a whirlwind of police reports and meetings with detectives. Vincent's information proved valuable, and the authorities assured us they were taking the threat seriously. We had to be cautious, but knowing that we had done everything we could to protect ourselves brought a small measure of comfort. As time passed, the investigation unfolded, and the danger seemed to recede. The shady dealings at Vincent's company were exposed, and several arrests were made. Slowly but surely, life began to return to normal. One evening, as we sat on the porch, watching the sunset, Abigail leaned against me. "It's finally over, isn't it?" I nodded, wrapping my arm around her. "Yeah, I think it is." "I love you, Dustin," Abigail said softly. "I love you too, Abigail," I replied. "And I promise, no matter what happens, we'll always face it together." I look forward to your comments on this story.